Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel, thank you. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Battle Through the Heavens based on novel. So let's start. The sight of Xiao Yan's group suddenly turned black the instant they stepped into the wormhole. Their bodies abruptly felt like they had lost their weight. However, this feeling swiftly disappeared an instant later. Immediately, a strange space tunnel appeared within their sight. The thing that appeared in front of Xiao Yan's group was a space tunnel that one could not see the end of. On the two sides of the tunnel was a faint silver-colored space barrier. There were over 10 tunnels that were 10 feet in size within the space walls. The ends of the tunnels were a deep blackness. The upper and lower parts of the tunnels were a similar darkness that caused one to feel some fear. A dense spatial ripple faintly seeped out from them. The entire tunnel was dead quiet without even the slightest sound. Xiao Yan involuntarily felt absent-minded upon seeing this kind of space tunnel for the first time despite his usual calmness. His gaze slowly looked over the barrier formed by spatial strength on both sides of the tunnel. Outside of it was a never-ending darkness. No one knew just what kind of scene was present there. Big brother Xiao Yan, take out the spaceboat that the ancestor of the Luo clan has given you. That thing's flying speed in this place is quite fast. With it, we will only need 20 days or so before we can arrive in the Central Plains. Xinlan suddenly spoke and broke this dead silence. Xiao Yan also recovered after hearing this. He shook his hand and a spaceboat appeared in it. This thing had just appeared when it moved like a fish that had just entered the water and expanded with the wind. Within a couple of blinks, it had transformed into a 10-foot large boat in front of Xiao Yan's stunned eyes. The surface of the boat had threads of a faint silver-colored spatial strength flowing over it, causing it to appear extremely mysterious. This thing actually possesses such a use. No wonder it is so expensive to build. Xiao Yan's mouth immediately emitted a clicking exclamation as he looked at this change. His body leaped and he took the lead to step onto this boat. The curious Xi Yang and two others swiftly followed behind him. There is an input point at the helm of the boat. As long as some Do-Chi is poured into it, it will enable this spaceboat to fly within this space tunnel. This spaceboat is really a good thing. There are factions and shops in the Central Plains that specialize in selling such things. There, the spaceboats are differentiated by grades. Grade 9 is the highest while Grade 1 is the lowest. From the looks of this spaceboat, it seems that it should be around Grade 4 or so. Xinlan smiled lovingly as she explained. Xiao Yan glanced at the front of the boat with surprise. He nodded before looking at the space barrier on both sides. He asked, "This thing won't end up getting out, will it?" "No, it won't happen. The spaceboat can only be used within the space tunnel. It is completely useless outside. Moreover, as long as one maintains a straight flying route, nothing will usually happen. Of course, nothing is for certain. Danger exists no matter where one travels. Moreover, this place also hides many dangers when one travels here. However, there is an extremely low chance of one meeting with it. I have never met such a thing during the many times that I have used wormholes," Xinlan explained. Xiao Yan sighed in relief in his heart when he heard this. He sat cross-legged at the front of the boat. He turned his head to Xi Yan and the rest. "In that case, everyone should sit tight. Now, the journey begins." Xiao Yan waved his hand as his words sounded. A powerful Do-Chi surged out before entering the input point. Immediately, the entire boat shook. Finally, a pushing force shot out from the tail of the ship. With a "shio" sound, the spaceboat transformed into a silver light that cut through space in a lightning-like manner as it shot explosively into the empty darkness. The speed of the spaceboat was extremely frightening within the space tunnel. It was not overboard to describe it as something that chased the stars and moon. Xiao Yan's group could only see the two silver-colored space walls moving, flying back with a "shio" sound as they sat within the boat. This kind of speed caused one's eyes to be dazzled. A silver glow quietly flashed within the quiet space tunnel. An instant later, it disappeared into the end of the darkness. That appearance was as though it was a lonely traveler in space. The so-called wormhole was a connection between two locations that allowed the distance between them to become extremely short. According to what Xinlan had said, they should be able to reach the Central Plains after 20 days or so with their speed. If they were to travel in the real world, it was likely that they would have required at least half a year in order to reach the Central Plains from Horizon City. After the initial freshness, the journey had once again become dull. Xi Yan could no longer endure boredom after snatching the boat to play for a couple of hours. She returned it back to Xiao Yan, entered the cabin, and slept. Xiao Yan did not dare to randomly enter his training condition while journeying in this kind of space tunnel, filled with unknown danger. In any case, his current strength was more than sufficient to maintain the support of the space boat. Hence, he did not train even once during the remaining traveling period. He would slowly recover the exhausted Do Chi by occasionally consuming a medicinal pill. Although the speed within the space tunnel was far faster than the outside world, the dullness was also even greater. The uniform blackness would cause someone mentally weak to feel some irritation within their heart after seeing it for a long time. It was fortunate that Xiao Yang was not the only person present in this place. Otherwise, that dullness would likely have caused even him to feel a little depressed. Time quietly disappeared during this kind of dullness. A silver glow flashed past within this faint silver-colored space tunnel. On it, a black-robed, young man mechanically raised his hand and a wave of Do Chi surged out. "Let me take over." A gentle voice suddenly sounded behind Xiao Yang. He was startled. He turned his head and saw that the little fairy doctor had appeared behind him. He smiled and said, "How many days has it been since we entered the space tunnel?" 16 days. We should be able to reach our destination after a couple more days. The little fairy doctor smiled as she answered him. After which, she slowly walked up to Xiao Yan and sat cross-legged behind him. A wave of Do Chi pillar whizzed out and immediately lingered over the energy input. Magic Xiao Yang smiled when he saw this. He withdrew his hand into his sleeve as a tiredness flashed across his eyes. Although this period of traveling did not exhaust too much of his Do Chi, he was extremely tired mentally. Xiao Yan inhaled a deep breath and slowly lay his body down. His hand cupped the back of his head as his eyes watched the endless blackness. A moment later, he slightly turned his head, looked at the graceful curves under the white dress beside him and smiled. He said, "Currently, we have gathered all the things needed to control the woeful poison body. However, due to that rank 6 sky poison dragon scorpion beast, it is likely that it will be unable to attain a perfect effect. I am also not very certain if there will be any sequelae. Hence, I suggest that we still try our best to follow the requirements of the poison pill for safety's sake and obtain that rank 7 sky poison dragon scorpion beast. We will deal with the woeful poison body after that. Unless it is a critical moment, it is best not to use that rank 6 monster core." "Yes, it is up to you to decide on this matter," the little fairy doctor nodded her snow-white chin and gently responded. Although her strength was much higher than Xiao Yang's, it seemed that the one who was making the decisions over these matters was always Xiao Yan. She did not reject such a feeling. "As a friend, I am really extremely dutiful." Xiao Yan raised his head to the sky and sighed. His voice contained a teasing tone. The little fairy doctor suddenly smiled when she heard Xiao Yang's words. She immediately rotated her eyes, glanced at Xiao Yang and softly said, "Is it just friends?" Xiao Yang was stunned by the little fairy doctor's words. His exchanged looks with her. After which, his eyes involuntarily drifted away. In an instant, the atmosphere at the front of the boat had become a little strange. Bang! This kind of strange atmosphere did not last long before it was broken by the sudden intense shaking of the boat. Xiao Yang and the little fairy doctor were startled. They hurriedly raised their heads. With solemn faces, they discovered that the two sides of the space tunnel not far in front, where the walls of the tunnel formed from spatial strength had become much weaker. At a glance one could even see the nothing blackness outside of the tunnel. "What has happened?" A startled exclamation sounded from within the cabin. Ziyang and Xinlan hurriedly ran out. With a sweep of their gaze, they noticed the much weaker space walls. The space walls here have yet to be completely repaired. An external force has broken the equilibrium within the tunnel. Be careful. An external strength has broken the equilibrium of the wormhole. Xinlan spoke in a deep voice. "Nothing will happen, will it?" Xiao Yan frowned and asked, It's uncertain. If the space walls become illusory, it is extremely easy for a space storm to occur. Should we be pulled into the nothingness space by the storm, it is extremely difficult for us to escape alive unless we are elite Dozans." Xinlan hesitated a little before speaking with a bitter smile. "Now we can only hope that we will not meet that damn thing. According to our speed we should reach the central plains soon." Xiao Yang knit his brows even more tightly when he heard this. He turned his head to the little fairy doctor. "Slow the speed a little. Be careful of the suction force that is transmitted from outside the space walls." The little fairy doctor's expression also became serious. A majestic Do Chi surged out of her body. It immediately wrapped around the boat. After which, the boat swiftly rushed through the space tunnel. Xiao Yan's group spent the next 2 days in an extremely nervous manner. This was because the space walls had become more and more illusionary. Dark black empty space had even appeared in some spots. The suction force that was transmitted from the holes would likely have sucked them in had the little fairy doctor not used her Do-Chi to stabilize the boat. Despite this, the journey was still extremely soul-stirring. Fortunately, despite things being thrilling, the so-called space storm did not appear. Xiao Yan's group slowly sighed in relief because of this. However, on the last day, when they thought that things would continue to be smooth, a clear cracking sound and an unusual whistling wind suddenly sounded, causing their expressions to become unusually ugly. Xiao Yan knit his brows slightly when he heard this. He looked at the space storm that was gradually spinning toward them. A moment later, he sighed and said in a deep voice, "Little fairy doctor, prepare to charge forward. You will protect the body of the ship. I will control its speed, magic, yes." The little fairy doctor nodded. She did not say anything else as her lovely body drifted back. Majestic Do-Chi surged out in all directions, transforming into a giant grayish-purple python. The enormous python wrapped the ship within its body before raising its head and hissing at the sky, "Go! Ziyang, Xinlan, hold on tight!" A deep cry was transmitted from Xiao Yan's mouth. Immediately, he waved his sleeves and powerful Do-Chi was poured into the space boat. Finally, it transformed into a fierce pushing force that caused the space boat to shoot off like an arrow with a "shio" sound. After forcing the boat to its maximum speed, the space boat transformed into a faint silver-colored figure. With a flash, it leaped 1,000 meters before finally running headlong into the raging silver storm. Bang! Bang! The space boat had just charged into the storm when the body of the boat began to vibrate. Creaking sounds were repeatedly emitted, as though it was a lonely boat navigating a great storm, facing the miserable fate of being shattered. Xiao Yan's expression gradually turned gloomier as he sensed the frightening tearing force that was emitted from the space storm. It was fortunate that the little fairy doctor was strong. If it had been some other person, it was likely that they would have difficulty blocking this kind of spatial tearing. Even though this was the case, the little fairy doctor would definitely not be able to last long. Hence, he needed to charge out of this damn place as soon as possible. This thought flashed across Xiao Yan's heart as he violently clenched his teeth. More powerful Do-Chi shot out. The speed of the spaceboat was gradually raised to its limit. Threads of faint silver-colored spatial force flickered repeatedly like a light. The spaceboat's small figure was insignificant within the enormous space storm. Even though Xiao Yan had unleashed the boat's maximum, the tearing force of the surrounding space was not reduced at all. Instead, it became even more terrifying. In the end, the enormous grayish-purple energy python that had been wrapped around the spaceboat began to show signs of becoming illusionary. Clearly, even the little fairy doctor had difficulty completely blocking the wild and violent suction of space. "Ziyang, help her!" Xiao Yan cried out in a deep voice. His eyes solidified upon sensing the intense bumps that were being transmitted from the body of the ship. Ziyang did not pipe up with any nonsense when she heard Xiao Yan's cry. Her small hands swiftly formed numerous seals that left one dazzled. Immediately, waves from a strange purple-colored glow surged out of her body. With the help of this crystal glow, Ziyang's small body suddenly began to swiftly grow. Her purple hair also grew like wild grass. In a mere instant, she transformed into someone with hair similar to a purple-colored waterfall, extending to her buttocks. Ziyang had used a secret technique during this critical moment, enabling her strength to be raised to its peak. When Ziyang became that sexy purple-haired beauty, the aura that spreading from her body greatly rose. In the end, it faintly exceeded Xiao Yan's aura, condensate spirit. A clear cry was transmitted from Ziyang's mouth. A bright purple glow shot from the top of her head. It vaguely agglomerated and formed an extremely large mysterious beast spirit. Due to Ziyang's purple light being too bright, it was difficult to clearly see the appearance of that beast spirit. This purple-colored beast spirit had just appeared when it let out a soul-stirring roar toward the sky. The voice transformed into faint purple-colored sonic waves that repeatedly spread out in all directions, suppressing the tearing strength of the space storm. The pressure the little fairy doctor was immediately reduced with Ziyang's help. Her pretty face was tensed as she diverted some attention to swiftly repair the enormous energy python that had been shattered by the space-tearing strength. A low roar was transmitted from Xiao Yan's throat. Numerous green veins appeared on his face in a ferocious manner, looking just like earthworms. Jade green Do-Chi wildly poured into the interior of the boat like a flame, causing the speed of the spaceboat to increase a little. The speed of the spaceboat had just been increased when the suction force emitted from the storm greatly soared. In an instant, the two ended up in a stalemate. The enormous space storm was slowly moving towards Xiao Yan's group. The speed has already reached its maximum. If this continues, we will be dragged back sooner or later. Xiao Yan's eyes turned bright red. He suddenly turned his head and cried out to Ziyan, "Come and pour Do Chi in. Increase its speed." Ziyan was shocked by this manner of Xiao Yan. She did not dare to ask any extra questions as she swiftly rushed over. Immediately, her hands were placed on the input point. The energy within her body swiftly surged out. After Ziyan replaced him, Xiao Yan shook his shoulders and a pair of enormous bone wings were spread out. The bone wings immediately moved and he flew away from the space boat in front of Xinlan's stunned eyes. After which, he landed on the tail of the boat and waved his sleeves. A frightening wind surged out of his sleeve before striking the boat, pushing the space boat forward. The instant Xiao Yan pushed the space boat, a counter-force caused Xiao Yan's body to be momentarily stilled. However, it was fortunate that his reaction was fast. Bright lightning flashed under his feet. The bone wings were flapped wildly under the sound wave of muffled thunder, blocking the suction force that was transmitted from behind. His body chased after the space boat. The suction force that was transmitted from the space storm behind was becoming more and more terrifying. With Ziyang's strength alone, it was obvious that she had difficulty maintaining the speed, yet the little fairy doctor needed to protect the boat's body. Hence, the space boat that was being pushed forward showed a sign of moving back. Bastard. Xiao Yan's face was flushed red. His veins repeatedly pulsed. The bone wings on his back were flapped and his body once again appeared at the tail of the space boat. He let out an angry cry as his arms pushed the boat. Wild wind was shot out before violently pushing the boat. One could see the space boat transforming into a silver glow that shot out. The next instant, it appeared at the end of the tunnel. Finally, it flashed forward before disappearing within the silver glow. Xiao Yan heaved a sigh of relief as he watched the space boat successfully leave. He turned his head slightly and looked at the close storm. The skin on his head involuntarily turned numb. He went all out to flap his bone wings while activating the 3000 lightning movement to its limit. Numerous afterimages repeatedly appeared. The next instant, the frightening suction force that was transmitted from behind was turned into nothingness. Xiao Yan had finally approached the exit of the tunnel while fleeing in this crazy manner. Just when he was about to charge out, his skin suddenly felt a chill. His body immediately pounced to the ground instinctively. A 10-foot-large silver-colored spatial strength shot past his head like a silver snake. After which, it struck the exit, causing the silver glow to wildly surge. Xiao Yan suddenly sensed a many times stronger suction force from behind when the silver glow surged. His heart was startled. The bone wings moved, and he used all his strength, transforming into a silver glow that eventually reached the silver glow, signifying the exit of the tunnel. Xiao Yan's body had just made contact with the silver glow when it suddenly disappeared. With his disappearance, this space had become void of life once again. Only that enormous space storm was still raging, and did not scatter for a long while. In the middle of a lush, green plain was an open ground filled with rock fragments. The ground in the middle of the open ground was filled with many mysterious seals. These seals were emitting a faint silver glow as they faintly emitted a space ripple. The open ground was quite quiet. At a certain instant, a wild wind suddenly appeared out of nowhere. A silver-colored light circle surfaced from the middle of the open ground. The figure of a boat flashed out before swiftly becoming smaller. Finally, it revealed 3 miserable figures on it. The silver-colored light circle slowly disappeared as the 3 people landed. Where is Xiao Yan? Why is he not out? After landing, the little fairy doctor hurriedly asked. Her heart had suddenly turned cold when she saw that his familiar figure was not with them. At this moment, Ziyan had once again turned back into the appearance of a little girl. However, her expression was extremely pale at this moment. Her gem-like eyes stared at the place where the silver-colored light circle had disappeared. There was a faint fog gathering there. Xinlan was similarly startled for a moment because of this. However, when she saw the flickering silver-colored runes on the ground, she finally sighed in relief. She said, "Relax, big brother Xiao Yan has already successfully exited the space tunnel. Where is he then?" The little fairy doctor and Ziyan had basically opened their mouths at the same time, demanding an answer. He has indeed left. However, it seems that the position of the space tunnel had changed at the last moment. Hence, the current him should have been sent to some other spot in the central plains. As for where he is, no. I don't know either. Xinlan's stammering voice caused the bodies of the other 2 to slowly stiffen. The human figure that appeared like a corpse was Xiao Yan, who had fled the wormhole. He had not immediately appeared on the ground when he had fled into the light circle back then. Instead, he had been violently mistreated by the spatial strength within the silver storm that had become unusually wild and violent before being spat out like garbage. Due to his body having been ruthlessly ravaged by the spatial strength, The current Xiao Yan was suffering from a serious internal injury. He did not even possess the strength to stand up. It had already been nearly a day since he had been spat out. He had been lying like a corpse for the entire day, slowly absorbing the natural energy and carefully refilling his greatly damaged body. Xiao Yang's finger touched his storage ring with much difficulty and a medicinal pill appeared. It was slowly placed into his mouth in a quivering manner. After doing this simple action, the interior of Xiao Yang's body suddenly emitted waves of pain, causing some cold perspiration to surface on his forehead. If not for that heavenly flame protecting his body, it was likely that his body would have been torn to pieces when faced with that wild and violent spatial strength. However, despite this, he was still unlucky enough to enter this seriously injured condition. As long as I recover a little do qi, I will be able to heal my injuries. After which, I will refine some medicinal pills and should be able to gradually allow my injuries to be completely healed. Hopefully, I will not be unlucky enough to meet a roaming magical beast. Even an elite do zone can't do anything to me. Thus, it would be really difficult to accept it if I ended up becoming the food of some magical beast. Xiao Yang slowly muttered in his heart. He sensed the warm medicinal strength that was spreading around his body. A tiredness once again surged into his head, causing him to gradually shut his eyes. When he was shutting his eyes, he seemed to vaguely hear a noise, an exclamation. The next time Xiao Yang woke up was because of an intense bump. That bump caused the bones in his body to appear as though they were falling into pieces. The painful feeling expelled the tiredness in his head. After which, he struggled to slowly open his eyes. A huge ceiling entered his eyes. Xiao Yang's finger gently rubbed the spot under his body as his gaze swept around him. Immediately, he understood where he was. He was in a carriage. In other words, he had been discovered by a passerby on the grass. Xiao Yang's gaze swept over his body and discovered that the traces of blood had been wiped off. Even the tattered black robe had been changed by someone. The current him was wearing extremely coarse linen clothes. Xiao Yan looked at the clothes on his body and was stunned for a moment. After which, he suddenly recalled something and hurriedly rubbed his right hand. He only heaved a sigh of relief upon discovering that the storage ring was still there. The curtain of the carriage was pulled apart while Xiao Yang sighed in relief. A eye-piercing light scattered in. Immediately, a middle-aged man with a somewhat strong build appeared in Xiao Yang's sight. He parted his mouth and smiled when he saw that Xiao Yang had awoken. With a somewhat honest and straightforward tone, he asked, "Little brother, have you woken?" Xiao Yang's eyes swept over the middle-aged man. Although he was seriously injured and the do qi within his body was empty, his spiritual strength was still as powerful as before. He immediately saw through this person's strength. The peak of the Do Ling class. The step to the Do Wang class was only a short distance. Ha ha, our convoy discovered you in a deserted grass patch. Originally, we thought that you wouldn't survive after seeing your injuries. Unexpectedly, you were able to wake up. The middle-aged man smiled to Xiao Yang and said, "I am called Han Chong, deacon of the Han clan of the Qianbei city. This time around, I coincidentally had a mission that made the convoy pass through this deserted desert. That's when we ended up discovering you. It must be said that you are really lucky. There are frequent wolf-related disasters within the desert. These beasts are all fierce fellows. Even a normal dosha isn't their match, and many experts have been eaten by them. If they had discovered you, it is likely that you would have been left as a pile of white bones. Big brother Han Chong, thank you for rescuing me." Xiao Yang spoke with great gratitude when he heard Han Chong's explanation. Although he was able to gradually recover a little do qi, if he were to continue lying on the ground, he would not be able to summon his demon puppet to protect himself, and no one could be certain whether something would happen during these 1 to 2 days. Hence, he really owed this Han Chong a favor for rescuing him. "So you met with a space storm. No wonder your injuries are so serious. However, you can be considered lucky. There are very few people who are able to escape alive after meeting a space storm within a wormhole. Our Han clan has a guard platoon that was swallowed by a space storm when they were passing through a wormhole back then." Han Chong finally came to a sudden understanding after hearing Xiao Yang's words. He immediately smacked his mouth and exclaimed, "The northern region of the Central Plains. May I know which region the Pill Tower is in?" Xiao Yang mused for a moment before continuing to ask, "The Pill Tower, huh? Ha ha, it is naturally at the middle region of the Central Plains. Everyone in the Central Plains knows about it. However, the northern region is somewhat far from there. Even if you were to use the wormhole, you would need to make quite a few transfers along the way," Han Chong said. Xiao Yang nodded slightly. He did not know where the little fairy doctor's group was. However, it was likely that nothing had happened to them. He inferred that the reason the spatial strength turned wild and violent when he entered the Silver Circle was likely because of the enormous spatial force that had struck the exit earlier. The little fairy doctor's group had already successfully exited before that dangerous spatial strength appeared. Ha ha, brother Xiao Yan, you should stay on the carriage a little longer since you have just woken up. It is still quite the distance to Tianbei City. If you have any needs during this period of time, you can call me. Han Chong looked at the quiet Xiao Yan and thought that the reason for the silence was due to his injuries. He ceased disturbing Xiao Yan as he smiled at him. After speaking, he turned around, pulled open the curtain, and walked away. Xiao Yan was able to see that there were quite a number of carriages around when he had pulled open the curtain. Clearly, this was a convoy. The interior of the carriage became quiet after Han Chong left. Xiao Yan leaned on the wall of the carriage as thoughts flashed through his mind. Now that he had been separated from the little fairy doctor's group due to an accident, the most important thing was to recover from his injuries. Otherwise, it would likely not be safe walking in this region where the strong were as numerous as the clouds. There is still a very long time until the pill gathering of the pill tower. If my injuries are completely healed, I might be able to roam this central plains a little and inquire about the Hall of Souls. I will also have to find that extremely good friend of Yao Lao, Feng Zuncha, of course. Perhaps I will also have to find the time to head to the Burning Flame Valley to see if I can obtain the final 2 changes of the Skyfire 3 mysterious change. Those would be a great use to me. Xiao Yang softly muttered to himself. Immediately, his eyes suddenly became much brighter. Additionally, I will also need to inquire about the mysterious clan behind Sun The current me is soon approaching the requirement that Sun had set back then. These thoughts flew through Xiao Yang's heart. A moment later, he let out a long breath. He rubbed his forehead and sensed the empty feeling within his body. His teeth were involuntarily clenched together in a violent manner as he forcefully moved his disobedient legs into a cross-legged training position. His hands formed the training seal as he slowly shut his eyes. Regardless of what happened, recovering his strength was the most important matter. This was especially the case when he was in such a foreign place. After the carriage curtain was pulled open, numerous covered carriages appeared in his eyes. There was a dark black bull-like magical beast with 2 horns on its head pulling the carriages at the front. The 2 sides of the carriages had numerous human figures on horseback. Most of these people had naked arms and wore rough skin clothes, which appeared sturdy. Behind them were weapons that contained a cold glow as they flickered glaringly under the sun. Oh, this little fellow has actually survived. Ha ha, Seng Nio, you have damn well lost to the old me this time around. Numerous gazes from both sides of the carriage were shot over when Xiao Yan opened the curtain. They were immediately startled. A joyous, wild laughter was also emitted from the mouth of a large man not far away. This large man had a somewhat sturdy build. His naked arm was filled with various kinds of scars. A ghost-headed large blade, that contained some chillness, on his back had a bright redness adhering to it. Damn it, I've seen a ghost. This little fellow is able to survive despite suffering such serious injuries. He is really lucky. The skinny-looking man immediately shook his head helplessly after the laughter from the large man sounded. After which, he glared at the man and snappily said, "What are you howling for? The old me doesn't care about this little bit of money. However, despite winning this little amount of money, it is still not enough for you to have more rides with the tender women in the brothels. Who asked you to bother about the old me?" the large man scolded. After which, he rode his horse forward and came in front of Xiao Yan. His gaze swept over the latter before he smiled and said, "Little fellow, I am called Gui Chu, Ghost Head. People call me Old Ghost. I was the first person to discover you in that northern desert. However, you need not thank me. The money I won earlier is enough of a thank you gift." Ha ha. "Thank you very much, big brother Gui Chu. I am Xiao Yan." Xiao Yan smiled as he sat down with his back leaning against the carriage. Most of the people whom he had met during these years were old cunning fellows. Their strengths were so great that they were terrifying. He had not made much contact with someone at such a low level for quite a long time. This caused him to recall those mercenaries when he was helping his father manage the marketplace in Wu-Tang City back then. They were similar to these people in front of him, appearing rough and uninhibited. With Xiao Yang's spiritual strength, he was naturally able to tell that the strongest among these large men in front of him was at the Do Ling class while the weakest was merely a Da dosha. This Gui Chu in front of him was only around a 2-star Do Ling. Ha ha, on account of you calling me big brother, I will protect you along this journey. However, little fellow Xiao Yang, this body of yours really cannot make it. You should train more in the future. If you don't possess a little strength in the central plains, you will be looked down upon by others. Xiao Yang's act of calling Gui Tuo big brother seemed to have caused him to be extremely happy. After which, he glanced at Xiao Yang's body, frowned, and chastised. His tone was one used when reprimanding someone from a younger generation. This caused Xiao Yang to slightly grin. Gui Chu, you should cease randomly grumbling around here and teaching others nonsense. The sound of horse hooves was transmitted from the front not long after Gui Chu's voice sounded. Immediately, Han Chong's chiding voice rang out, it is not as though I have said anything wrong. Gui Chu dryly laughed and replied upon seeing Han Chong. Han Chong ignored this fellow. His gaze turned to Xiao Yang, saw his much better complexation, and he involuntarily smiled as he said, good. Little brother Xiao Yang, despite suffering such serious injuries, you are actually able to walk after 2 days. Xiao Yang smiled. He randomly found an excuse and smiled as he said, I have a strong life. Han Chong was a simple and honest person. He did not bother too much on this matter. Looking at the sky, he loudly said, it is becoming dark soon. Xiao Jie, young lady, has said to prepare to set up camp. Gui Chu, you will lead a couple of people and see if there is any good spots nearby. Liang Ya, you will lead some people to patrol around. Gang Bei, you will lead a couple of people. Clearly, Han Chong had quite a high position within this convoy. Numerous orders were emitted from his mouth with no one voicing any objections. All of them uttered, yes sir, in a strange manner before leading their people away. Han Chong also sighed in relief after the orders were issued. He smiled and asked Xiao Yang, can you walk? Xiao Yang nodded. He leaped down from the carriage. Although his footsteps staggered a little, he still managed to stabilize itself. Seeing this, Han Chong bitterly laughed as he said, looks like you still need to recuperate. After suffering such serious injuries, it is extremely difficult for you to recover completely. If any sequelae were to remain, it is likely that your training in the future will become troublesome. Xiao Yang smiled and indicated for Han Chong not to be worried when he heard the concern in his voice. Han Chong ceased saying anything more after seeing that Xiao Yang was so open-minded. He quietly sighed and turned around, preparing to gather people to set up camp. This convoy was quite efficient. Within less than half an hour, numerous white-colored tents appeared on a small hill. There was also a fence surrounding the tents, and a medicinal powder that repelled poisonous insects was scattered outside the fence. Xiao Yang did not do much work due to the weary state of his body. He randomly walked to a spot in the camp before sitting down. His gaze slowly swept around him. The lady's face softened a little upon seeing Xiao Yang nod his head. She randomly tossed something to him and said, I am called Han Shui, and I am currently the person managing this convoy. You can look for me if you have any issues in the future. If you perform well this time, I might be able to allow you to join the guard of the Han clan when we arrive at Tianbei City. Although it will not allow you to gain a huge fortune, it will at least enable you to survive. This is a little healing medicine and should have some effect on your injuries. Additionally, we will be passing through the territory of the demon snake Xia Man. You should be careful. Hide in the carriage and don't come out. After saying this, Han Shui walked past Xiao Yang. After which, she walked into a tent. Xiao Yang smiled after receiving the jade bottle Han Shui tossed over. Although this lady was stern and appeared somewhat cold and indifferent, she seemed to be a good person. No wonder the people here had great respect for her. However, what was the matter with that thread of familiar feeling? Xiao Yang involuntarily frowned when he thought until this point. It was impossible for him to know her. Little fellow Xiao Yang, not bad. You still possess some spirit of a man. Some of the surrounding Han clan's guards involuntarily smiled and praised when they saw that Xiao Yang had drank half a bag of potent wine in one shot. Xiao Yang smiled to everyone. He was just about to speak when the tent in the middle of the campsite suddenly opened. A figure that appeared extremely alluring under the moonlight immediately appeared in front of everyone's gazes. That figure was Han Shui. At this moment, Han Shui appeared to have just bathed. Hence, her smooth black hair carried some moisture as it floated down. At this moment, she appeared to have the additional enchantment of a woman. This caused quite a number of younger Han clan's guards to have quicker heartbeats upon seeing her. Han Shui walked out of her tent. Her gaze randomly glanced around once. After which, she sat down beside a fire not far from Xiao Yang's group. She took out a dagger and took a piece of grilled meat from the fire rack before slowly placing it into her small mouth. The elegance from her slow chewing appeared to be incompatible with the surrounding rough chewing atmosphere. However, it must be said that the current Han Shui was extremely beautiful and moving. The voices of Han Chong and the others were unknowingly suppressed after Han Shui had come out. Their dirty jokes were also hurriedly swallowed into their stomach. Xiao Yang turned his head and looked at Han Shui, who appeared to have a delicateness that belonged to a woman under the firelight, which was mixed with the stern coldness from the daytime. Why? Have you been smitten by Xiao Jie, young lady? Han Chong by the side suddenly rushed forward while Xiao Yang was focusing on Han Shui and softly teased. The warm smile on his face caused these strong men to appear somewhat insignificant at this moment. Of course, all of them were men. Hence, there was no need to hide these words. Xiao Yan was startled when he heard this. He immediately laughed and shook his head. Magic, there is no need to be embarrassed. Who younger than 30 in this guard unit is able to escape Xiao Jie's enchantment? However, all of them understand that they can only think about such matters in their hearts. Xiao Jie is already an elite Do Wang at such a young age. Her great talent is only surpassed by elder young miss in the entire Han clan. With the status and position of us guards, it is little different from attempting to get something far beyond us. Han Chong patted Xiao Yang's chest and sighed. Xiao Yang nodded slightly. Although he was unaware of just how strong the Han clan was, being the young lady of the Han clan, Han Shui's status was naturally higher than these guards. Hence, these young men in the clan who harbored a crush on her would likely end up with a dashed dream. However, Xiao Jie, young miss, is indeed quite a good person. Although she is usually very stern, she treats us guards quite well. If any guard ends up seriously injured in a mission, she would get the clan to fork over some money to give to that guard's kin. It should be known that once a person lost his use in other places, the other party would abandon you. One should consider himself lucky if the other party doesn't quietly kill you because they are afraid that you will leak some secret. Han Chong smacked his mouth and said. Xiao Yang was startled. It was unexpected that this cold-looking lady would actually have such a kind heart. A Do Huang-class demon snake? It actually possesses an intelligence and knows how to occupy a territory and be a bandit? Xiao Yang's face was somewhat strange when he spoke. Rank 6 magical beasts mostly have quite a high intelligence. Moreover, this Xia Mang has eaten a demon transformation pill. Hence, it can escape its snake shape. Its intelligence is also higher than other rank 6 magical beast. Han Chong said, demon transformation pill? This medicinal pill is actually able to allow a magical beast to transform its body. I remember that only a body transformation pill has such an effect, and that is a tier 7 medicinal pill. Xiao Yang spoke in a stunned manner. The demon transformation pill is only a tier 6 medicinal pill. Its effect is indeed similar to that of a body transformation pill. However, it only allows a partial transformation, and its effect is far inferior to a body transformation pill. Such a medicinal pill is most sought after in some magical beast clan. Han Chong explained. Xiao Yan only sighed in relief after hearing this. He now understood the worry of Han Shui and everyone else. After all, the strongest in this convoy of theirs was Han Shui, and she only had the strength of a Do Wang. She was undoubtedly far inferior when compared to Xia Mang. Hopefully this fellow will not ask for a huge sum tomorrow. Brother Xiao Yang, you should go and rest first. I still need to command the others to strengthen our defenses and make the proper preparations. Han Chong sighed. Immediately, he patted Xiao Yang's shoulders, turned around, and walked toward a tent. Xiao Yang looked at the campground, which had become much quieter. He could only helplessly shake his head. He turned and returned to his own tent. However, Xiao Yang did not sleep immediately upon returning to the tent. Instead, he took out a bottle of medicinal liquid, which he had used when training in the magma world back then, from his storage ring. After which, he applied it all over his body. That kind of icy-cool feeling caused the piercing pain within his body to be greatly reduced. Moreover, Xiao Yang was able to sense a thread of warm energy following his skin and slowly merge into his body. After a couple more days, the injuries that I have received should gradually improve. At that time, my body will be able to accommodate the entry of some Do Qi. Xiao Yang sensed the change within his body, and his expression also relaxed. He put the linen clothes back on his body. After which, he sat cross-legged and entered a training state, carefully absorbing the natural energy to repair his injured body. The next day, Xiao Yang opened his eyes when some noise sounded within the campsite. He clenched his fist, sensed the weakening pain within his body, and involuntarily smiled. Perhaps it was because he ended up frequently injured, but his recovery rate in the face of such injuries caused even him to feel surprise. After getting up and arranging his clothes, Xiao Yang walked out of the tent. He smiled at Han Chong's group, who was hurrying to pack up the camp, before stepping forward and lending a hand. Han Chong's group, which was aware of Han Shui's character, did not reject Xiao Yang's help. They simply smiled and handed some simpler tasks to Xiao Yang. Xiao Yang threw the tent in his hand into a carriage and had just turned around when a serene fragrance passed by him. The figure immediately paused and a pair of pretty eyes swept over. A faint voice also sounded, "You will continue to remain in the carriage today. Don't come out." She did not give Xiao Yan the opportunity to speak. She returned to her own carriage. After which, a moving cold cry was emitted from within it, "Start the convoy." The corner of Xiao Yan's mouth twitched involuntarily as he looked at the convoy, which was proceeding forward with a creaking sound. This person is really not bad. I will just wait and see. If any accident is to happen, I will quietly lend a hand. This video will end here. Thank you for watching.